One mistake, one glance at my husband Izael's phone, and now a message full of hearts and kisses has shattered my world. Who is this Chozen, and what's happening tonight? His betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. It's time to face him. I never could have imagined the peaceful life I had built with Izael would suddenly take such a disquieting turn. For years, I lived in ignorance, blissfully considering everything perfect. Izael wasn't the most talkative or affectionate person. Still, I just chalked it up to his reserved personality. It is not like I needed him to be overly expressive, or so I thought. That all changed when I found a text message on his phone. I wasn't trying to invade his privacy. I had made a simple mistake. I was looking for our grocery list. Instead, I found something much more shocking. It was a text from Chozen, from someone I'd never heard him speak of. "Tonight's the night," it said, next to a few little emojis that left little doubt. Heart, kiss, fire. The wind went out of my stomach, sucker punched. Sat down and read that text 1,000 times, trying to fathom it. Was this just a friendly conversation that my insecurities blew out of proportion? Or was this the crack that would unleash a much darker reality? The signs I should have seen over the years swirled through my head. Late-night meetings, averted glances, excuses for work. My chest tightened, and I knew then this wasn't paranoia. This was real. Chapter 1. The First Crack. I sat there for hours, frozen in place, eyes wide and stuck to the screen. I finally placed his phone down, my hand shaking when I did so. I had never been one to pry, never had the urge to check his phone before, because I trusted him, and this was something I always prided myself on. I'm the cool wife who doesn't need to snoop around or keep tabs on her partner. But as I sat there, staring at a piece of paper that could crush all we had been working on in our tentative relationship, I thought, was I too trusting? Too naive? My mind swam to all the times Izael had come home late. The nights I asked him where he was, he'd callously change the subject with a casual, "Work ran late," or "I was out with some friends." Then at that point, I believed him. I'd never further press him for more than that. But now, it all seemed so painfully obvious. Why was I so blind? That evening, I couldn't confront him right away. My throat was tight, and my mind was in a mess. The very thought of accusing him really terrified me. What if I was mistaken? What if it was merely some misunderstanding? At this moment, a life without him, a ruined everyday life, was too much to bear. So instead, I waited. Waited for the time to be suitable to confront him, waited for strength to hold myself together. Chapter 2. The Confrontation. When he returned that evening, I sat on the couch, my mind foggy. His steps as he entered, putting his shoes beside the door with the sound was just too loud, or so it sounded. He called out my name, yet I couldn't get to talk back. My hands got clenched into fists, and my anger rose like a volcano with boiling lava. Izael entered the living room, cool, calm, and collected as if everything was just hunky-dory. He looked at me with furrowed brows. "Adhara, you, okay?" I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Who is Chozen?" His face froze for a beat, a flicker of something, crossing his features before he masked it swiftly behind a mask of impassivity. "What are you talking about?" "I read the message, Izael. Don't you dare lie to me," I said, my voice quivering. "Who is she?" There was a moment's silence. His eyes flickered towards his phone on the table, then back at me. I could just about see the wheels in his head turning as he thought of what to say and how to spin it. But I wasn't going to let him off easily. "She's just a friend. We've been talking about work, that's all." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, really? Because last time I checked, work colleagues don't send each other heart emojis and talk about 'tonight's the night.'" I mocked the message, my voice full of sarcasm. His face reddened, and I could have sworn guilt and swam within his eyes for 1 second. But instead of confessing, he dug in his heels. "Adhara, you're overreacting. It's not what you think." "Not what I think? Then what is it, Izael? Because right now it looks like you've been sneaking around with someone else behind my back." I felt the tears rise and refused to let him see me break down. I had to be strong and composed. He blew a heavy sigh and ran his hand through his hair. "Okay, all right. We have been talking, but it's nothing serious. It's just flirting. It meant nothing." "Didn't mean anything?" My voice cracked as the reality of his words finally hit home. Do you even hear yourself? You've been cheating on me and you're trying to downplay it as nothing serious. Chapter 3. The Crumbling. The days that followed were like treading on a minefield. Every interaction with Izael was tense, filled with unspoken accusations and deep resentment. He had tried to convince me that it was all a mistake, that he wasn't interested in Chozen. But of course, I knew better. The trust between us had been torn, and no reassurance from his lips could ever let me get rid of this feeling of something irreparably broken. I had always thought I would know exactly what to do when something like this finally occurred. I would leave without any problem, without batting an eyelash. But now, living it, the decision was more complex. Ending our marriage freaked me out. Where was I going to go? What am I going to do? And what of our lives that we'd built together? How could I turn my back on memories and plans for the future? One evening, I was browsing through social media. I was browsing through an endless stream of pictures of other couples, smiling, happy, perfect. The burning feeling of jealousy scorched my eyeballs. How many were faking it, like I had been? How many of those picture-perfect lives were masking fissures beneath the surface? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to talk to somebody. My hand found the receiver, and I dialed Kylie, my best friend from college. Always the voice of reason in my life, she'd always seemed to be able to find the light when my emotions clouded my judgment. When she answered the phone, I could already feel the concern in her voice. Adhara, what's wrong? The moment I heard her voice, the dam broke. I told her everything. The message from Chozen, Izael's betrayal, how lost I felt. She listened in silence, never once interrupting, just letting me spill out all the pain and confusion that had piled up inside of me. Adhara, she whispered when I finished, you don't deserve this. You deserve someone who will love and respect you, not lie to you. I know, I whispered, my voice thick with tears. But I don't know if I can just walk away. You don't have to decide now, Kaylee said softly. But you need to think about what will be best for you. Not for Izael, not for your marriage, you. Long after we had hung up, her words stayed with me. It would be the first time I started thinking about myself in a very long time. I wanted what I needed, and I realized I'd been so concentrated on holding everything together I'd forgotten how to take care of myself. Chapter 4. The Other Women. The more I started to dig into Izael's life, the more I realized he wasn't the only one. There were more women, names that I didn't recognize, but all with the same flirtatious and suggestive messages. Some of them went back years before I found out about Chozen. I felt like it was a kick in the stomach. How could I have missed that? How could I have been oblivious to what was happening right under my nose? What hurt the most was that when I confronted Izael, he didn't even try to deny it. He looked at me all defeated and said, I don't know why I did it. Those words rang in my head for days. He didn't even know why he did it? Was that supposed to make me feel better? If anything, it made me worse. How could I ever trust someone who couldn't even explain his actions? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I'd spent years building a life with Izael, putting aside my hopes and dreams to support him in his career. And this was how he repaid me? By sneaking around with other women, lying to my face, then acting like it wasn't so bad? I began to regard him for what he was, a coward, someone who could not handle the responsibility of a real relationship and sought the easy way by indulging in fleeting, meaningless flings. But as much as I hated him for his actions, I couldn't deny that part of me still loved him. It was a twisted, painful love that held on even when you knew you should let go. This love made you question everything you thought you knew about yourself. Chapter 5. The Discovery. One afternoon, while Izael was off, I reached a decision. I had to know the fullness of his betrayal. No longer would I live in the dark, always hanging on tenterhooks to see what other secrets might be lying just beneath the surface. I opened his laptop and began digging through his emails, social media accounts, and anything else I could find. At first, it was the same flirt messages, pictures, plans to meet up. But then I came across something that made my blood run cold. It was an email exchange between Izael and a woman named Izael, a name I'd never heard. The messages were explicit about how they would see each other at a hotel, how much they missed each other, and how they couldn't wait to be together again. That wasn't even the worst part. Their date was 2 years prior. It had been going on for years, long before I suspected a thing, where I had been planning our vacations, our anniversaries, and our future, he had been planning secret rendezvous with other women. I couldn't breathe. My room started to spin, and I had to sit down so I wouldn't pass out. How had I been so blind? How had I not seen the signs? How could he have kept this up so long without a hint of guilt? Chapter 6. The Decision. That night, I finally confronted Izael once and for all. Nothing was left to hide, nothing left to lie about. Before him, I unfolded all the evidence. The emails, the messages, the lies. He didn't even try to refute it. He didn't even raise an eyebrow in surprise. "I'm sorry," he said with a hollow voice. "I never wanted to hurt you." I cynically laughed. "Well, you did." Over and over again. There was a long pause till I could feel the weight of the years between the memories of our life together crashing in on me like a wave. But they couldn't wash away the truth that our marriage was over. "Izael, I won't continue with this anymore," I said softly. "I deserve more than that. I deserve more than you." Real emotion shone in his eyes for the first time I had ever seen. Perhaps regret. It was too late. I had already decided. Now there was no looking back. Chapter 7. Rebuilding. The following weeks were among the most challenging I have experienced. Moving out of the house we shared, filing for divorce, and letting our friends and family know about it all became so unreal in front of my eyes, as if I existed in a life that was not mine. But within all this, I knew I had made the right choice. Kaylee was there for me every step of the way, helping me pack up my things and listening to me cry when the weight of it all became too much to bear. Slowly, I started rebuilding. I found a new apartment, started focusing on my career again, and even began attending therapy to help me process everything that had happened. And then, when I least expected it, Cassian just walked right back into my life. Chapter 8. Cassian's Return. I hadn't spoken to Cassian since our college days, when we were just two carefree souls dreaming of changing the world. He was always the quiet, reflective type, but beneath that stoic calm lay an intensely loyal heart. We had drifted apart after graduation, each busy with our lives and struggles. But it was now, at one of the most challenging moments in my life, that the universe had brought him back to me. All that started with an innocent social media message. "Hey, I heard what happened. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen, the words both comforting and invasive simultaneously. How much did he know? How had he even heard? Gossip of a small social circle, I suppose news of my marriage failure was bound to spread like wildfire amongst our common acquaintances. However, Cassian's approach was different. He wasn't nosy. Neither was he prying. Sincerity seemed to be conveyed in his concern. At first, I had reservations. I wasn't ready to speak with anyone, let alone a friend I hadn't seen in several years. But something in his message pulled me into a sense of familiarity that I needed to improve. "So," I replied. "Thanks for reaching out. It's been rough, but I'm getting through it." A stream of back-and-forth messages followed for the next couple of days. Our conversation started lightly, reminiscing over college days and updating each other on what was new in our lives. Soon, the walls I had built around myself began to crumble. Before I knew it, I was opening up to Cassian in ways I never had with anyone else. Chapter 9. A New Beginning? It was only a short time before we decided to meet in person. Cassian had suggested a quiet cafe near the park, far away from prying eyes. I felt nervous then, not knowing how it would be to see him again after these many years, especially when my life was in tatters now. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a table by the window. His eyes combed through the street as though he were searching for me. When our gazes met, he smiled softly, a reassuring smile that dissipated some tension within me. "Adhara," he said as I sat down. His voice was so warm and familiar. "It is good to see you." "You too, Cassian," I replied, shaking a little. Suddenly, I felt utterly awkward. I was different from the girl he had known in college. I'd been through too much, whittled away by the heartbreak and betrayal. Could he see it in me? Had he sensed all the shattered pieces I tried to put together? It was like our words didn't falter anymore after that. Words came quickly, as they did all those years ago, but this time was different. A feeling of depth in our connection was only quite there then. Cassian listened while I told him everything that had happened with Izael. The lies, the betrayal, the women. He didn't judge me or offer words of consolation. He merely listened, his eyes steady as if he could somehow absorb a little of my pain and carry it for me. As the afternoon wore on into the evening, I knew how long it had been since I'd had anyone like Cassian, somebody who could look at me for what I was without any expectations weighing him down or condemnation. For the first time in months, I felt I took a breath. Chapter 10: The Ghost of the Past. And when I finally thought I was beginning to get on with my life, Izael reappeared, like the ghost haunting a life I was trying hard to rebuild. It all started with a telephone call. At first, I didn't recognize the number, but something told me to answer it. The moment I heard his voice on the other end, my stomach tightened up. "Adara, it's me." "Izael." I could keep my voice from sounding shakier than a leaf, but my heart would burst. Why was he calling now? "I've been thinking about everything. I know I hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I can't stop thinking about what we had. I want to talk just once. Please." His words hung in the air, heavy with all that had transpired, and for that moment of a second I considered it, hearing him out, letting him explain. Part of me still wanted closure, or perhaps it was the familiarity of his voice stirring something inside me. But then I remembered the pain, the betrayal, the months of lies he had spun so quickly and how it had torn me apart. I couldn't go back. I had already found another chapter, and I wouldn't let him drag me back into the chaos I struggled so hard to escape. "Izael," I stated firmly, "we have nothing more to say to each other. You have made your choice, and I have made mine. Do not call me again." There was a moment of silence at the other end, a quiet, "I understand," and the call was over. I set the phone down, my hand still shaking a bit. It was as though I had just closed the last door to a part of my life that had haunted me. There was no turning back now. I was free. Chapter 11: Something More. The weeks passed by, and Cassian and I grew closer. What started out as a random interest in reuniting old friends had, with time, shifted into something different. There was a spark between us, a touch I hadn't felt in so long, but I was wary. Opening myself to anyone else was terrifying after all that had happened with Izael. We were strolling in the park one evening when Cassian suddenly turned to me seriously after dinner. "Adhara, can I ask you something?" My heart missed a beat. "What is it?" "I know you've gone through so much, and the last thing I want to do is rush you into anything, but I must know if you could see us as more than just friends." I ceased to march, my breath catching in my throat. The truth was, I had been thinking about the same thing for weeks, but I was afraid to get hurt again, afraid to be able to trust someone only to have him turn around and betray me as Izael had. "I don't know," I whispered, my voice hardly heard. "I'm scared, Cassian. I don't know if I'm ready." He reached out and took my hand gently in his. "You don't have to be ready right now. I'll wait as long as you need. I just wanted you to know how much I care about you more than I ever thought possible." His words were like balm to my torn heart. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future with another person, something not marred by the past. Chapter 12: The Final Goodbye. Soon enough, another message came from Izael, this time in an email. Long, filled with regret and apologizing. It told me how much he missed me, and how much he had really lost. He even confessed to things he hadn't before, like how he had never valued what we had, and that he had taken me for granted because he knew I would always be there. But none of it moved me. His words once meant so much to me but were as hollow as everything else. I had heard them all before, and they carried no weight anymore. I had moved on, and there was no place for Izael anymore. I didn't reply to the email. I didn't have to. My silence was my reply. Chapter 13: A Future Ahead. Time passed and my life slowly got its rhythm. Cassian remained a constant presence in my life. His straightforward support helped me find healing in ways I never believed it would. We were taking no pressure, yet the more time we spent together, the deeper I felt for him, how much I trusted him. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of my new apartment watching the sun go down, I turned to him and said, "Cassian, I think I'm ready." He looked at me, his eyes full of warmth and understanding. "Ready for what?" "Ready to move forward, with you." A slow smile spread across his features, and he took my hand. "I've been waiting for this moment, Adhara, and I promise you, I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in so long, I felt at peace. Finally, after all that had occurred, I was back to myself. And now, with Cassian by my side, I was ready for whatever the future held. Epilogue. A new chapter. I now realize that each heartbreak, every tear, and every doubt brought me to this very moment. Izael's betrayal had destroyed me, but also rebuilt me, stronger, wiser, and more in tune with who I am and what I deserve. I do not regret the past, for the lessons I learned from it I would have otherwise never learned. Having Cassian by my side, the strength and clarity with which I face this new phase of my life gives me a different sense of what will happen. Those shadows of my past no longer loomed over me as they once did. Every day was like a fresh canvas, waiting to be knitted into experiences and emotions that were essentially mine. The first few weeks in our relationship felt like a dream. He was everything I hadn't realized I had been missing: attentive, thoughtful, and genuinely interested in my well-being. He took the time to learn about my favorite things, small joys that had been overshadowed by the pain of my past. We would have spent weekends exploring the city, searching out quaint little cafes, going to art galleries, and sometimes just lying on the couch watching movies in the late-night hours. One evening, he surprised me with a picnic at the park. The sun was setting, and everything was painted with this golden color. He laid a blanket on the ground and brought various snacks: cheese, crackers, strawberries, and my favorite chocolate. We sat together, laughing and sharing stories, and I couldn't help but feel a seed of hope begin to bloom in my chest. "Adhara," Cassian said the words softer as he looked at me. "I know the past couple of months really sucked for you, but I just wanted to let you know that I am here for you, no matter what." His words sounded like a pledge, and then and there, it clicked how much I needed a person like him. Someone who would not be put off by my past, but would stand by me while I worked my way through it. Chapter 14. The past catches up. Just as I was finding my rhythm in this new life of mine, Izael decided to rear his head once more. It came on a silent Wednesday afternoon when I received a message from an unknown number. At first I thought it was spam or a random ad, but when I read the message, my heart sank. "Adhara, it's Izael. It has been a while, but I must talk to you. It's important." My hands shook as I glared at that screen. Months of radio silence, and suddenly he gets in touch with me? What could be so urgent that it needed to cut through the silence I had fought for? I breathed in heavily, my mind racing with 1,000,000 questions. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to block his number and never look back. Still, another part, battered by his manipulations for so long, was curious. What did he want? Was he regretting everything? Was he ready to take responsibility for his actions? "Adhara," Cassian said, coming into the room and breaking into my thoughts. He could tell from my face that something was wrong. "What's wrong?" "It's Izael," I said, turning my cell phone to him. "He wants to talk." Instantly, Cassian's eyes flashed cold as his protective instincts went on overdrive. "You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. You've come so far. Don't let him drag you back into his mess." "I know," I said, my voice shaking. "But what if he wants an apology? What if he wants an explanation?" Cassian moved closer, his eyes level. "You don't owe him anything. You did the hard work of healing. Don't let him take that away from you." I nodded, but the doubt nipped at me. I could feel the tension in the air, reminding me how easily things could unravel. After a few minutes of silence, I made a decision. "I'll respond," I said finally, my heart racing, "but I'll do it on my terms." Chapter 15. The Meeting. Finally, after a few hours of musing on what I needed to say, I replied with a message. "What would you like to talk about?" The response came in virtually instantaneously. "Could we meet? Just for a couple of minutes? I promise I won't take too much of your time." I'd arranged to meet him at a cafe in town, the same place. In fact, I'd first met Cassian after it all fell apart. It felt oddly poetic, as if I were revisiting the crime scene. My heartbeat seemed like it would stop at any moment as I stepped inside the cafe. Izael sat with his head hunched over a corner table. For the first time since I met him, his eyes weren't sparkling or gleaming roguishly, but seemed shadowed by some unseen weight. He was different from the last time I saw him, his immaculate appearance worn, a subtle slouch to his shoulders and dark circles under his eyes telling tales of sleepless nights and regret. When our eyes met, I felt a surge of emotions. I was angry and bitter, yet comforted that it was finally over. I took another deep breath and approached the table. "Adhara," he practically whispered pleadingly as he stood while I sat. I didn't know precisely how to reply while staring into his face. "What do you want, Izael?" He ran his hand through the muss of his hair, his face a battlefield of guilt and desperation. "I wanted to apologize for everything. I've thought about the lies and the betrayal and realized how hurt I caused you. You didn't deserve any of it." I could feel the pain in his eyes, but I wasn't about to let myself get swayed. "You made your choices, Izael. You chose to lie and cheat. You chose to hurt me." "I know," he replied, his voice cracking. "But I want you to know that I regret it daily. I only appreciated what I had once it was gone. I miss you, Adhara." His words came at me like a wave, a crashing mixture of sadness and anger that hit me with the force of a blow. I'd spent so long getting past this pain, and he was trying now to drag me back into it. Chapter 16. The Decision. "Izael," I said firmly, voice never breaking. "You can't just waltz back into my life and expect everything to be all right. You have brought so much anguish into my life that even words don't come to mind. It took me months to try and mend the wounds of your treason, and I will not allow you to drag me again into the darkness." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "You had your chance and you threw it away. I've moved on. I'm happier without you and won't allow you to disrupt that." He looked crushed, and my heart went to him momentarily. Then I remembered how many nights I'd cried, how many times I'd wondered if I would ever heal. I couldn't let that happen again. "I just wanted you to know how truly sorry I am," he whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never thought I would lose you." With that, he stood up, and as he walked away, I felt a weird mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and empowerment. I had confronted my past and stood my ground. I had taken control of my narrative and felt free for the first time in a long time. Chapter 17. New Horizons. Week after week, the shadow of Izael in my life grew weaker as my relationship with Cassian grew stronger. He had become my rock through this process. When I needed an ear, he was there, and when memories were too much for me, he was there to comfort me. So, one weekend, we took a road trip to the nearest beach. The ocean air was refreshing, a far cry from the turmoil of the past few months. As we took leisurely steps along the shoreline, the waves crashing against the sand, I felt peace enveloping me. "Adhara," Cassian said, stopping and turning around to face me. "I know you've been through so much, and I admire your strength. But let me tell you now that I am here for you, whatever that might be. I do not want to push you to do something, yet I deeply care about you." His sincerity washed over me like a warm wave, and I let my guard down for the first time. "I care about you too, Cassian. You've helped me heal in ways I never thought possible." We paused, the sound of the ocean fading into the background as our eyes locked. An undeniable connection had been building between us since we first reconnected. "I'm ready to move forward with you," I said, my heart racing at the very thought. "I don't know the future, but I want to explore it together." A smile broke out across his face, and at that moment, I knew I was making the right choice. Chapter 18. The Future Beckons. The walk on the beach, hand in hand with the horizon ahead, gave a sense of hope budding inside me. My journey wasn't easy, but the fact that it had brought me here to begin again, to embrace love yet again, and to be happy was a gift per se. Over the following weeks, Cassian and I bonded over hopes and dreams, laughter and tears. He was patient, understanding my need for space and time to heal. Yet, with each passing day, I was a little more gone for him. We sat on my balcony that evening with city lights twinkling below us. Cassian took my hand and stared into my eyes. "Adhara, I want to be with you. I want to build a life together, one that's filled with love and trust." My heart swelled at those words, a sense of joy washing over me. "I want that too, Cassian. I really do." When our lips leaned into kisses, I knew all that was just the first chapter of a new story, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Epilogue. Embracing the journey. With time, as I settled into this new phase of my life with Cassian, I realized that healing would take time. Of course, there are still moments when all the betrayal on Izael's part comes to my mind. It can no longer harm me. I learned to embrace the pain and understand it, but never let it define me. With Cassian at my side, it was as if the purpose was rejuvenated within me. Together, we traveled, saw new places, and formed memories no other would have. With each different adventure drawing us closer, and each of those experiences we shared between us, I felt my past scars start to heal. I learned to trust again, not in others, but in myself. I knew that I too was capable of love and happiness despite the many betrayals I had been subjected to. I found the strength within myself to be a force to be reckoned with. I knew the future was bright, standing and staring at the horizon. Whatever lay in store, I knew I would go out there and face it head-on with Cassian by my side. It wasn't just about finding love again at the end, it was about finding my worth and embracing that life journey, which could get pretty beautiful and messy.